welcome to this podcast on corridors. With me is Joost Overdijking, a specialist in the matter. Actually, Joost, what are we talking about if we talk about corridors?
Well, the obvious thing would be to say we are talking about big railway lines, but I think the concept of corridors is the identification formally by infrastructure managers and by investors such as nation states of certain itineraries from endpoint to endpoint. On which the main freight transport flows are going, and which therefore merit harmonization, standardization, and investment.
And UIC has been long involved in the development of corridors.
That's right. When the corridor regulation for Europe was introduced in 2010, UIC started the so-called ECHO project, which stands for Efficient Cross-Corridor Organization. And in that group, we reunite the railway advisory group speakers of the 11 rail freight corridors of Europe in order to develop common experiences and feed them back to the infrastructure managers to help them and to press them to implement standard technical parameters that have been developed by the EU, and also to press them and to help them with improvement of their service.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now also I understood that now recently there has been again, let's say, revitalization with new legislation coming on in Europe, or?
That's right. So more than 10 years ago, this regulation was introduced. In 2012, another regulation was introduced called the 10T regulation, which basically tells the member states of EU to implement a set of technical parameters on the main freight corridors of Europe in order to make international freight transport easier. And both these regulations are now in the process of being revised. And ECHO has coordinated the process of the RUs to evaluate the experiences so far with what we have worked with since 2010 and 2012, and we have have formulated propositions for how things could be better done in the future. And we have discussed that with the infrastructure managers and with the rest of the sector, and that is input to, for example, Rail Freight Forward initiative of the RUs.
Yeah, and we've also been very active on the international level. We were, let's say, more also at the cradle of the development of the Eurasian corridors, where we already in the early 2010 we did the first Eurasian corridor study between Asia and Europe. It was a well-perceived study done in collaboration with Roland Berger, which we redid in 2017 and lately also in 2020, and where you can very well see what the development of that northern corridor between Asia and Europe has been. With the latest events, we see a little shift to the more southern corridors. And now this year, we have even redone that study with a focus on the middle and the southern corridors. And this work actually has now, let's say, emanated in the RAME group, the group around the Middle East countries, where also we try now to develop and bring again those different countries and different operators around the table to work around that corridor. So Joost, what would you say is really the value for the members of being part of that corridor, concept of that corridor organization?
I think what is extremely valuable for the members is to have one platform where you share your experiences and your issues very often when it comes to cross-border transport, to logistics, when you have to deal with different infrastructure manager organizations and executive boards that manage these corridors, a whole panoplia of organizations that we face as a railway undertaking, and sharing that information and developing common positions that we bring to the infrastructure managers to help them improve their service. I think that is a very valuable work that we've been doing in the past 12 years now, since 2010. And we know that it has been very much appreciated by not only by the RUs who participate, but also by those RUs who cannot participate because they are maybe they think they're too small, they don't have the manpower to do that, but even by the parties on the receiving end of our input.
Mm-hmm. And then why should they choose, let's say, UIC to represent them, and what is there the unique position of UIC?
Because we deliver the technical input. So technical also being defined as input about logistical issues and things that do not work well. That is, as in all other topics, that is our strength. We are the technical platform, and we link that also with the other working groups that we have, with the other expertises that we have on loading guidelines, on wagons, and on dangerous goods, for example, where there are always topics that are touching and where we have to cooperate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, this is then you already touched upon the regulations coming on, and what else can will the near future bring us, or what should be now the focus areas for the coming years within ECHO, for example, as the European case?
I think for Europe, the focus for the members of UIC and for the whole sector is very much on ensuring that we have enough capacity on the network. And the Railway Advisory Group speakers, and therefore also the ECHO project, they elaborate their experience and their input on where the pain points are on the network, and where the pain points are when it comes to the planification of infrastructure works, TCRs we call them. And there will be a lot of focus on that, and that is a field where, together with all the other actors in the sector, we will work on.
Thank you very much, Joost. This very nicely summarizes what we as UIC bring on corridors. This brings us to the end of this podcast. Hope to see you soon in one of our coming sessions.